Hello everyone, welcome back to LewisFiction and welcome to Prewriting MCU Spider-Man 5. If you have not seen MCU Spider-Man 4 yet, then make sure to go back and watch that before you watch this so you can get the full story in full. Also, if you are new around here and enjoy fanfictions, we're so close to 5,000 subscribers, I would really appreciate it if you guys could hit that subscribe button and hit the bell next to the subscribe button so you do not miss any more videos posted on the channel. And with that being said, let's get straight into this. So there are a few precursors that I just want to address before we get straight into this film. Essentially, the Kingpin War from MCU Spider-Man 4 still rages on. I don't think this Kingpin saga would have been wrapped up straight away in Spider-Man 4, that's why it is continued into this film and into MCU Spider-Man 6 as well. We've also got to remember that Kingpin is a big player in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole, not just the Spider-Man films. So even though Kingpin will be more on the back burner for MCU Spider-Man 5, his presence will still be felt, and at the beginning of this movie, Spider-Man will be stopping crimes as the war still rages on. We will then cut to two of the main players for this film, Roderick Kingsley and the Symbiote. We follow a series of events from the end of Spider-Man No Way Home, as we see that the symbiote that actually was left in the Marvel Cinematic Universe ends up in the hands of Roderick Kingsley, who at this point is a fashion designer. Now, I'm taking a little bit of a different direction for the symbiote in this version of the story, where you guys are just going to have to wait and see what there is later in the film. But either way, Roderick Kingsley comes into possession of the symbiote. And this is where we are then reintroduced to Peter Parker, our main protagonist, catching us up on events that have transpired and updating us on the Kingpin War. However, this is also when we are introduced to Peter's main story in this film. Peter wakes up from a dream where he imagined Carly Cooper dying just like Aunt May. Not only that, Peter watches on as Carly dies at the hands of the Green Goblin, specifically Tobey Maguire's version of the Green Goblin, just like Aunt May did in Spider-Man No Way Home. The arc that I portrayed for Peter in the last film was that he didn't have to stay closed off from society. He was allowed to let other people into his life because he realized that's the way that Aunt May would want him to live. However, in this film, after the events taking place in between MCU Spider-Man 4 and 5, Peter and Carly have actually gotten closer with one another and have gone on a few dates. But because of this, Peter is starting to regress. Peter is starting to feel like the same thing is going to happen to Carly that happened to Aunt May. We do know that Peter hasn't been this close with anyone since, of course, May's passing. And now that he is close with the likes of Carly Cooper and even Miles Morales, he will start to see them dying in his nightmares, setting up Peter's story for this film. We will then cut to a scene where Carly and Peter go out on a date. It's the beginning of their relationship, as they haven't really been on many dates before, but there is some clear chemistry between them and they get on pretty well. The date goes on as we learn more about Carly. She is also currently studying at ESU, but she is studying fashion design. And in this first portion of this section of the first act, we'll start to learn more about Carly Cooper as a character. After the date ends, it's really clear that they both like each other, and Carly asks Peter to go out again on another date, and Peter says yes. They agree on a day the following week as they part ways. When Peter gets home to his apartment, he'll open a letter that showcases that rent prices have been going up. After the war on New York, with Kingpin and his goons and with all the superheroes fighting back against him, rent prices have gone up since the destruction of buildings, apartments, and just accommodation in general has become more prominent across the city. It's almost like Spider-Man is causing Peter's own downfall, but there's nothing he can do about it. So to combat this issue, Peter goes to J. Jonah Jameson to have a meeting with him. This will be the first time that we get to see J. Jonah Jameson and Peter Parker actually interact in person, since most of their interactions in the last movie were over the phone. A lot of what Peter does for J. Jonah Jameson with this version of the character will be mostly digital. That's because we live in a digital age where photos, like in the Tobey Maguire films and in the early Stan Lee and Steve Ditko comics, aren't handed in over the counter anymore. Rather, they're just emailed in. However, this meeting will be important. Peter is usually the head photographer on taking photos of Spider-Man and superhero stuff. However, Peter will be requesting to J. Jonah Jameson if he can get some more work. It's not like supervillains come around every other day, so Peter's gotta pay his bills somehow. And since Peter has been loyal to J. Jonah Jameson and the Daily Bugle thus far, Jameson puts him on the media team to go and take photos at the Kingsley Expo. When Peter asks what the Kingsley Expo is, J. Jonah Jameson explains that it's essentially a fashion event where Roderick Kingsley, the fashion designer, will show off brand new clothes that he's going to start selling worldwide. It's a pretty big deal in the fashion industry, so Peter must make sure he's there on time. Jameson also stresses that it's really important to make sure he gets a really good and clear photo of Roderick Kingsley showing off some of the outfits. Jameson is looking to publish an exclusive on some of the products. With this in mind, Peter leaves. However, when Peter makes it home, he then realizes that the Kingsley Expo actually clashes with the date that he was meant to go on with Carly. The next day, Peter is at college. He bumps into Miles and they catch up with each other. He asks Miles what he is to do, because he doesn't know how to approach the situation and break Carly off. Miles tells him to be straight with her, tell her that he has a job. Peter will say to Miles that he can't do that, what if she just blows him off completely? And Miles says that she's not going to do that. She'll respect the fact that Peter has work to do. And Peter says that he's right. We then cut to a scene where Peter tells Carly that he can't make their date as he's got a job. Carly is slightly annoyed at first, but is generally okay with it as she understands. Things like this happen, and she says they'll just rearrange for another time. Our next scene will be Peter arriving at the Kingsley Expo event. However, as Peter trundles around trying to take photos of things he thinks Jameson would find important, he then bumps into none other than Carly Cooper, who is there as a fashion student gathering inspiration. They are both surprised to see each other, and Peter asks Carly what she's doing there. Carly will tell Peter that since he cancelled their date, she decided to come to the expo instead. As a fashion student, looking at the competition sometimes really helps her, she'll tell Peter. Peter will tell Carly that he's only doing this for the money and he actually has no idea what's going on. And that's when we'll get some exposition into who Roderick Kingsley is as a person, as Carly Cooper will fill Peter in as to who he is. She will tell Peter that Roderick Kingsley is one of the best in the game, and will tell him that everyone wants to be him. He is literally the king of fashion, and that this fashion show is going to be one of the biggest expos of the entire year. And she'll also tell Peter that Kingsley has teased something big for tonight's grand reveal. Wondering as to what it could be, Peter and Carly watch on as Roderick Kingsley enters the stage, giving us a grand introduction. He's confident, he's suave, and he's got lots of charisma. This is when we learn about Roderick Kingsley's fashion show, and we learn about the types of designs he does. He's extravagant and outgoing, and just like he is as a person, his designs completely represent his persona. Roderick will reveal a new line of clothing and unique and wacky fashion items inspired by villains from New York's past. Kingsley will explain that he wanted to turn some of the villains that have loomed over New York in the past into fashion pieces as to spread a new light and a new meaning to the situation that was caused by them. Obviously, Peter sitting there in the audience finds this incredibly weird as Kingsley rolls out outfits inspired by the likes of Scorpion and many other MCU villains. But it really hits home when Roderick Kingsley reveals the main piece of the entire line, an outfit inspired by what people are calling the Green Goblin, the man on the bridge from the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. Roderick Kingsley calls it the Hobgoblin. As everyone claps, Peter's face sinks as he's reminded by the Green Goblin's presence. Just as his dream reminded him at the start of the film, Peter Parker cannot escape the Goblin. The hood, the torso, the leggings, the boots, everything screamed the Green Goblin. Even though its colour scheme was slightly different and of course inspired by the Green Goblin, it still hit where it hurt for Peter. And that's when Kingsley goes on to his grand reveal. He hypes up the audience by saying this fashion piece will literally change the way we think about fashion and will change the world forever. As he brings out a glass container, he holds black goo in front of the audience that moves around seamlessly by itself. He tells the audience that this is a living, breathing piece of clothing, that what he's holding in front of him will transform into any piece of clothing he puts his mind to. And as he opens the glass container, Roderick Kingsley puts on the black goo as it attaches to his skin. And on mere command, the suit transforms from a mere tracksuit to a tuxedo, and then from a tuxedo into some sportswear. Roderick Kingsley says that this is the future of fashion. Whatever this material is, it can be used to create any piece of clothing that you demand of it. Kingsley then places the goo back in the glass container, but before Peter could grab a photo of Kingsley, his spider sense goes off as the window beside him smashes in and a bunch of guards come running into the room. Peter guides Carly to safety and then leaves. Carly begs him not to leave her alone, but Peter has no choice. He transforms into his Spider-Man suit as he engages with the guards, who are trying to go after Roderick Kingsley and the glass container. Peter takes out the guards one by one, however the glass container is smashed in the process. After the dust is settled, Spider-Man asks Roderick Kingsley if he knows who those people were, and Kingsley says he has no idea. Spider-Man will say whatever they wanted that black goo. As Peter thinks to himself that he could give a pretty good guess as to who sent those goons. It was probably Wilson Fisk. But as Spider-Man leaves the situation and leaves the scene of the crime, he accidentally steps on some black goo on the floor as it attaches to his leg. Peter wakes up the next morning. He's tired as hell and everything hurts, almost like he's just done an extreme workout. He's confused and he turns on the TV, as multiple news sources report on the return of Night Monkey, a Spider-Man copycat last seen in Prague. Peter laughs it off, thinking someone is impersonating Night Monkey. He thinks that's quite funny, but then he checks his phone. He's got multiple missed calls from J. Jonah Jameson. He then gives JJ another visit, and JJ tells him he's not impressed. Not only did he not get any photos of Kingsley's event, he's also completely missed Night Monkey. He tells Peter that he's never getting extra jobs on top of Spider-Man ever again. We then cut to Kingsley. He's not happy. He's lost the suit. That suit was worth a lot of money. He doesn't know how this has happened, or if one of the goons managed to escape with it. But as he does more research into what it could possibly be, he finds out that potentially that suit could have been more powerful than he could have possibly imagined. Peter returns home. He then calls Carly. Carly reveals to Peter that she's mad at him for leaving her alone when the guards attacks the expo. As Peter tries to apologize, Carly is having none of it, saying that they just need a break for a while. She can't talk to him right now. And as Peter puts the phone down, he lies on his bed and eventually ends up falling asleep. Like the start of the film, Peter starts getting flashes of Carly's death, Miles' death, just like Aunt May's. He sees Toby's Green Goblin, but instead of running away or waking up, he fuels all the emotion that he's just got from that call with Carly and that conversation with J. Jonah Jameson to stand up to the Green Goblin in his dreams. Peter approaches Norman Osborn and starts beating him to death. Peter starts angrily punching him in the face until he actually wakes up. His costume changes around him. Peter looks at his hands. They're black, not red. And then, as reality fades in around him, he sees he's not in a dream at all. He's actually at a crime scene in the middle of New York. He's angrily punching an unarmed man in front of a jewelry store. This isn't a dream anymore. It's real life. Peter drops the man as his face was bloodied. He says he's sorry as he swings off into the distance. This is when the film starts to take a turn. This is the midpoint of the entire film, where Peter finally gets the symbiote. As it is revealed through that scene, as the dream faded into reality, Peter is started to use the symbiote as a form of escapism. And the main theme throughout the rest of the film from here on out is that Peter will be using the symbiote's newfound abilities to escape from his fears. This sort of behavior will have metaphorical connotations with substance abuse, representing the inability for Peter to actually open up about his emotions and tell other people around him what he's feeling about what is going on in his life. Rather, Peter will use the symbiote as this form of escapism to escape from his fears and escape from his irrational thoughts. We then get a couple of scenes of Peter scared, but then accepting this newfound power. He thinks that he should return it, but then realizes that none of his fears will come true. As some of the scenes will showcase and represent, the power that this suit holds is beyond anything he's ever felt before. And with this newfound power, the people closest to him, the people that he's allowed to let into his life, as per the arc that he went through in the last film, will now be protected forever. Because the power that he holds will mean that nothing like Aunt May will ever happen ever again. We will then cut to a scene with Roderick Kingsley. His investors aren't impressed, saying that he could lose everything if he doesn't get that goo back. This comes around as his investors also realize the true nature, the true power, and the true worth of the suit that Kingsley has lost. Afraid to lose his power and afraid to lose his influence, Kingsley makes a vow to stop at nothing until he gets that suit back. And that's when Kingsley finds out it was in fact Spider-Man that stole the suit. He sees a news report of the black-suited Spider-Man. Spider-Man stole it. That night at the expo, he was there. It was all a plan. It was all a ploy. Spider-Man is behind this all. And with that, Kingsley has his mission in mind as he holds up the Hobgoblin mask in front of his face. He will stop at nothing until he gets that suit back. We then cut to Peter back at college with a newfound confidence. Similar to the montage that happened in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, we will start to explore the idea that Peter now has a new confidence about him. He feels new, his mind finally not plagued by the idea of Carly or Miles' death. Miles and Peter will meet up, and Miles notices the change in Peter. Peter also bumps into Carly and apologizes and asks if they can go out again. Carly ends up accepting, saying yes, and Peter thinks to himself that the suit is a cure. Everything starts going right in his life, personally and with Spider-Man. Spider-Man is more powerful than ever, and Peter is on a win. Peter also sends more videos and photos to J. Jonah Jameson, who is impressed, and once again, Peter gets another indication that everything in life is going the way it should be. It then comes time for Peter to go on his date with Carly. He thinks to himself that he'll hang around as Spider-Man before he goes on the date. And when looking at what suit to choose, he chooses the black and tosses the red and blue onto the bed in front of him, leaving his apartment as the black suited Spider-Man. However, as Peter swings through the city confidently, this is where it all comes crashing down, as we get the first appearance of the Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin attacks Spider-Man out of nowhere, and the two engage in battle. Spider-Man asking who is he, and the Hobgoblin will say that he wants back what is rightfully his, and Peter doesn't even know what to think. However, Peter is caught off guard, as Peter looks into the Hobgoblin's eyes, the Goblin persona bringing back awful memories for him, reinstating his biggest fear in this film. The Hobgoblin will say that he's stolen what's his, and Peter will barely get away. The fight will come to a close, and Peter won't know what's hit him. Carly Cooper, on the other hand, has been ditched again, and she angrily texts Peter, asking Peter where he is. However, this is when we enter a new stage in the film, where Peter becomes scared by the prospect of Norman Osborn's return. Peter ignores Carly's and Miles' text, who both try to contact him. He obsesses over the next few days to try and find a Norman that exists within the MCU, but he can't find anything. As Norman Osborn mentioned in Spider-Man No Way Home, Oscorp, his son, and none of that exists in the MCU. However, the appearance of the Hobgoblin has frightened Peter to death. He realizes that the prospect of the Goblin's return is all the more possible. So he does some digging, scared as to what he could find. However, he can't find anything. He was just being overdramatic. So who is the Hobgoblin, Peter would think to himself. And then he thinks back to the fashion show. Could the Hobgoblin be Roderick Kingsley? It would certainly make sense, and everything would line up. We will then get a scene where Spider-Man confronts Kingsley, but Kingsley simply says that he's just a fashion designer, playing it low-key and cool. Peter becomes angry, however, the symbiote fueling his emotions. He will smash things in Kingsley's office, asking for answers. However, Kingsley won't give him any, and Peter has no proof, so leaves still at square one. However, after Kingsley watches Spider-Man swing off into the distance, he holds up the Hobgoblin mask in front of him as he begins to follow Spider-Man. The Hobgoblin keeps a safe distance as he follows Spider-Man to an alleyway where he gets changed into Peter Parker, recreating the famous panel from Amazing Spider-Man issue 39, but instead of the Green Goblin, it's the Hobgoblin. We then cut to a few scenes with Carly Cooper. She's angry. She just wants answers. Why isn't Peter answering her? She will ask Miles where he is, and Miles will also say that he doesn't know. Miles will give her his address, and she eventually decides to confront him at his apartment if he won't answer his phone. She knocks on the door and asks if he's in there. However, to no avail. There is no answer. She calls him a coward, and in her anger, she breaks into Peter's apartment. However, as she stands there taking in his apartment, she glances over to his bed, where just on top of the covers lays the blue and red Spider-Man costume. And that's when it dawns on her, and that's when it clicks. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And the questions that she had are answered in one sudden moment. After Carly had left, Peter returns to his apartment. Miles will call him asking him if he's okay, however Peter is really not in the mood. Miles will say that Carly is worried, and Peter says that he's got bigger things on his mind, as he throws his phone at the wall. Even though Peter had taken the suit off, the suit starts to consume him again, as he starts to get enraged more and more, smashing things in his apartment, until he looks towards a photo of Aunt May. And then he looks at his hands. What has he become? An emotional, angry, revenge-fueled mess. She wouldn't want this. He still thinks back to Norman Osborn. He still thinks back to that day. The people closest to him. He couldn't bear to suffer the same pain. And that's when he realizes the symbiote, it isn't a cure. It doesn't make him forget. It only makes it worse. He has to confront his fears head on, instead of trying to distract himself. Because in the end, he's going to be worse for wear. And this is the point in the film where Peter decides to take the suit off, as we get the famous clock tower scene, this time with Tom Holland's Spider-Man. The symbiote puts up a fight, but Peter manages to win in the end as it escapes. The next day in college, Peter apologizes to Miles. He says he was stressed over work, and Miles will say it's okay, but it's not with Carly. He has to speak to her, make it right. Peter will nod. Peter will end up meeting with Carly later that day. However, before he had chance to even say a word, the Hobgoblin once again attacks. Now knowing Peter's secret identity, he puts up a fight that he couldn't before. He goes straight for the heart and Peter's worst fears come true. Hobgoblin swoops off with Carly Cooper in his arms. Peter has no choice but to go after him. Peter swings up to the Hobgoblin as they engage in battle. Carly falls on top of a building. Peter does his best to keep up with the Hobgoblin. However, the Hobgoblin is a strong and worthy opponent, and without the symbiote, Peter finds it a lot harder to combat the might of the Goblin. The Hobgoblin will ask Peter where the suit is, and Peter will say he doesn't know, he's taken it off. He will go on to tell the Hobgoblin that it's dangerous, he shouldn't be messing with that suit, and the Hobgoblin will beg to differ, saying that he's going to kill Carly if he doesn't tell him where it is. And in a moment of desperation, Peter engages in battle with the Hobgoblin once again, eventually coming out on top. The Hobgoblin is eventually arrested and is revealed to be Roderick Kingsley all along. We then cut to one final scene between Peter and Carly, who make up. Peter says he's wanted to tell her all this time, and Carly tells Peter that she already knows. And then they kiss, they embrace, a massive weight off Peter's shoulders. And with that, Peter Parker will struggle no more, as his mind is finally free from the burden. His fears can be realized, and instead of using the symbiote as a form of escape, he can tell Carly the truth, and brutally be honest with himself about the way that he feels. And with that, and with Peter's arc and story finally complete, in conjunction with what he learned in MCU Spider-Man 4, we end the film right there. Thank you very much for watching my pre-write of MCU Spider-Man 5. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to like on it. And also, if you want to see more of my content on the left side of the screen, you can actually go and check out my version of a Spider-Man cinematic universe. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can check out the first episode in the video series that I have discussing what would have happened in MTV Spider-Man Season 2. Thanks for watching, keep telling stories, and I'll see you in the next one.